Hi everyone, my name is Terri and welcome to the Pink Dumbbell Problem and the Friday Fact Day series where I get to tell you about the work I'm doing in fitness, feminism, and philosophy. And today's fact is... This is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a really long time, but I was kind of just waiting for something to be a good example that came up. And of course, this week that happened. By the way, philosophy fans, Agnotology fans, there's some Agnotology coming, so just hang on towards the end of the video. I'll get to it, I promise. If you're an online person at all, and you no doubt are because you're here, you've probably seen by now that AOC, which is Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez in the American government, appeared at the Met Gala a few days ago wearing a white dress with red lettering all over it that read, "Tax the Rich." Now, as you can expect, the right-wing people were plenty upset. The right-wing media made a big case about it. But interestingly, at least from my perspective, there was also a lot of upset on the left-wing side. Now, no politician is perfect, but AOC tends to be one of the better ones, and certainly is one of the most left-leaning ones. So why are people who are into the leftist side of the political sphere going after her on this? And there's all kinds of arguments. You can Google them and look them up on different social media platforms. It was all over Twitter. Basically, the idea was that this is a really expensive event. The tickets cost somewhere around $30,000 per person. The dresses and clothing that people wear, which is kind of the whole point. It's known as the Oscars of fashion. Pricing is out in the stratosphere and unthinkable to most of us. So how can somebody who advocates for taxing the rich and distributing wealth to the poor show up at an event like that? And you know what? To a point, it's a fair criticism. But really, a lot of it was overblown and people saying that she shouldn't have been there and stuff like that. Look, she's a politician. She's a public figure. She's going to have to do that work. What's more interesting to me is this phenomenon that we see called eating our young, usually used in different professions when we talk about a young person recently qualified as a professional coming into the workforce in the profession. And those who are the more experienced people, the older people who should be mentoring this new person coming in and onboarding them as they come into the profession, are in fact gatekeeping and bullying and sometimes outright hazing in some professions. It can be really ugly stuff. Now, if you Google the phrase eating our young or professions that eat their young, you'll get literally thousands of hits of articles about nursing. Professional nurses have a reputation for this, and this is actually a term that was created by people in the nursing profession quite a few years ago. I've seen a few different reports, but it looks like to have come around probably in the 1980s, mid-80s. But it's certainly not the only one. Now, I mentioned in last week's video that I am actually a fully trained teacher. That's what the big blue and gold wall hangings are for. I did my teacher training a long time ago. It's actually 20 years this month since I started my last year of training. So I'm 19 years into my license, although I don't actually teach high school anymore. Back then, as pre-service teachers, we were actually warned about this whole eat their young phenomenon. Just a quick aside, I should mention here, pre-service teachers is the term we actually use in the teaching profession for what you would probably consider a student teacher, somebody who's in college or university or what have you, working on getting their license. We don't actually call them student teachers within teaching. You're pre-service teachers. And those who have their license and are on the floor in the classroom teaching are in-service teachers. Just a little bit of professional jargon for you there. You know me, I love some jargon. At the time I was in my pre-service teacher training, the problem had been well acknowledged. We knew we weren't as bad as nursing, but teaching had its reputation, and a pretty bad one, for eating our young as well. So there was a lot of work going on both in the pre-service training and in the in-service training. So that's when teachers go to in-service days and they get additional training and professional development. There was a lot going on to try to get rid of that. And at the very least, if it couldn't be eradicated in the older generation of teachers, we could at least wait it out till they retired and hopefully make sure that new teachers coming into the system weren't being brought into the same line of thinking and that the buck was going to stop with us. Now, I haven't taught school in a long time, despite some friends nudging me when they need a substitute. But from what I understand from my friends that are still doing that work and friends that are now themselves teaching pre-service teachers, that really has finally been more or less eradicated. So the good news is that with some policy work and some education work and some good management, keeping tabs on things, this can be eliminated. But that's in the professional setting. What concerns me is that in the public discourse, the things that we see here on YouTube or over on Twitter or whatever socials you're on, that whole thing around activism where there isn't necessarily a professional license to work towards, there isn't necessarily a governing body of any kind, the eat our young thing is still a big problem. Definitely something that I think people who've been in leftist activism for a long time, or maybe they're fairly new to it and quite zealous about it, feel a need to do when somebody makes what they consider a mistake. And maybe some of it too is that, especially on platforms like Twitter, you can't tell what somebody's tone is when it's just the written word. Now, what's interesting to me in all of this is why is it that it tends to be women's workplaces, women's professions, the feminized professions like teaching and nursing, and those spaces and those activist groups that tend to exhibit this phenomenon of eating our young? So as somebody who has been a professional feminist for, 20 plus years and has studied it academically off and on since the mid-90s, I've seen this play out, particularly in feminist circles, but in leftism in general. YouTube, or LeftTube, if you want to call it that, is certainly no exception. It's very easy to say things and maybe misconstrue things or get heated in the comment box, as you've seen on pretty much any channel that's bigger than mine. There tends to be a need for absolute, unequivocal perfection in women doing certain kinds of work. We realize this is particularly systematic within the feminine professions because, of course, women are under a lot more scrutiny in society. We know we're under extreme scrutiny, and for women or marginalized persons, which tends to be the people in the leftist side of the discourse and the leftist side of politics, are always scrutinized more than the people on the right wing. When we get to intersecting marginalizations, of course, I've talked about intersectionality in another video, so once again, link below, blah, 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 you know what to do. After this video, watch this one first though. It becomes really tempting to go, you didn't think of this and you didn't do that and this looks bad, and optics and tone policing and all of those things come into it. It really discourages anybody who maybe is on the cusp of being more leftist oriented in their thinking or wants to explore that, but then the bullying just hits too hard and it hits too fast and they get the heck out. Here's the agnotology part that some of you were waiting for. In agnotology, one of the areas or branches of ignorance that we talk about, and again, I'll put some links to agnotology videos down below. One of the branches that we talk about is native state, which is just simply not knowing something because you haven't been exposed to it. And I think we need to be a little more aware of that in leftist work, whether that's activist work, writing work, pop culture work, producing videos, whatever you do. We need to be more aware of that because there's no way every person doing any area of work can know every possible thing that they have to consider. I mean, if we did that, every YouTube video would be like 14 hours long. And at some point, you have to stop theorizing and actually get some work done. You have to do some praxis. Note to self, I need to add a video about praxis to my to-do list. Never ends. When we do that, when we do the practical thing, when we get out there and put boots on the ground or feet on the classroom floor or whatever we do, it's never going to be absolutely perfect, but if we wait till it's perfect, it'll never get done. The other thing that really, to borrow a pop culture phrase, grinds my gears, is that we have a problem celebrating the wins in leftist politics and leftist discourse. We gotta do more on that. I get annoyed because, you have a win of something. It can be anything, big, small, doesn't matter, but something goes well. And AOC's dress a couple of days ago is a grand example of this because there she was, huge platform, international platform, cameras everywhere. And she said, tax the rich. And what did people want to do? Tear her down for not doing it enough, or not doing it sooner, or not doing it right, or spending tens of thousands of dollars to do it, which from what I understand, she didn't actually spend money. I think she was gifted the ticket to go. But anyway, regardless, she was torn down for it. There was media on that. There are people talking about that who were interested in the fashion world or interested in celebrities who've never been familiar with the tax the rich concept before, and now they've been introduced to it. So I consider that a really, really big win. I think for a lot of people, it's hard to celebrate the wins because you still see all of the other problems that are out there. And maybe something that got media attention isn't fixing the problem, but it's starting to bring more attention to it, and that is a good thing. There's no quick fixes in any of this. We're going to be chipping away at it. It's that whole thing of eating an elephant. You just got to take it one bite at a time. But when we refuse to celebrate the wins and we always eat our young, you can see why people burn out. And burning out in leftist work, whether that's activism work, whether that's academic work, whether that's pop culture work, whatever you're working in, burnout is really common. And really, if people are just snarking all the time, and even when you do something good, you get snarked at, What's the incentive to stay? We see it in activism of all kinds. Volunteer burnout in volunteer-based organizations is a huge, huge thing. Anybody who works in the professional side of organizing volunteers and working for charities and nonprofits will tell you that's an ongoing concern. And we see it in teaching and nursing and those kinds of professions where perfectionism is absolutely on demand at all times. By the way, I did a video about perfectionism and why that's a problem a couple of weeks ago, so link down below, blah, click the thingy, you know what to do. We need the wins. So celebrate those, share those, show people that it's going well. Yeah, it's not perfect. Sure, it's definitely not done, but things are improving. And we need to keep that in mind, and we need to celebrate that and show that to the world. And of course, lift heavy, fight the patriarchy, and I'll see you next time. Bye.